I am going to tell you a tale about Dusty, and I am aware that you will tell me a humorous story about the money you lent me. You think you know Gene Hackman? Think again. I guess I go over to Dusty's a little. What if that was only half the story? Hollywood remembers him as the tough guy on cinema, the two-time Oscar winner, and the gruff noons legend. By speaking up, Dustin Hoffman is exposing a side of Hackman that the cameras never saw, a contradictory man who is intense but humorous, fiercely private yet brimming with hidden tales. 9 days before his body was found by looking at his pacemaker, a guy who disappeared from the industry left a mystery even in death. What was Gene Hackman's greatest secret, what was his true personality behind closed doors, and why did he leave at the height of his career? Dustin Hoffman was present from the start, through the hardships, the victories, and the shocking conclusion. This is Hackman, the Bond that began it all on the first meeting, as you have never seen him before. When Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman first met in 1956 at the Pasadena Playhouse, a reputable acting school in California, they were an unusual pair, two young men from two different worlds. One dream unites them. Hoffman was a short, slender man who had already left his studies in medicine and music to pursue acting. Hackman, on the other hand, was older, larger, and had served in the Marines before deciding to pursue acting. Their differences were obvious from the beginning. Hoffman was high-strung and self-deprecating, while Hackman was a gruff, no-nonsense kind of guy. Nevertheless, their relationship was put to the test through hardship rather than instant success. Hackman, who insisted on not following the company line when it came to acting technique, was fired from Pasadena Playhouse, a rigorous grading institution, within 3 months. Undeterred, he went to the extreme of moving to New York City to further his career on his own terms. 2 years later, Hoffman followed him into the city with just $50 and no clear plan. Desperate and worn out, he looked for Hackman, who immediately took him into his house. As a courtesy, Hoffman spent weeks sleeping on Hackman's tiny apartment's kitchen floor. Hoffman would never forget their friendship, which was based on surviving the cold, hungry nights while chasing an almost impossible dream. The two men relied on one another to get a foothold in the industry because they had few acting opportunities and did whatever work they could find, from moving furniture to typing for the Yellow Pages. They helped each other out through countless auditions and gave each other harsh but honest criticism. They had a difficult romantic relationship. Hackman challenged Hoffman to be more self-assured, and Hoffman kept Hackman grounded and reminded him to let go and accept himself for who he was. They spent late nights on their rooftop apartment making music, discussing Marlon Brando's acting and hoping one day they would become successful. Though they were constantly broke, they had something invaluable: the belief that they could succeed even when the world doubted them. Through all the rejection and uncertainty, they never stopped believing in each other, but little did they know their biggest breakthroughs were just around the corner. From to Hollywood icon by the mid-1960s, after years of struggling to find work, both Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman were still relatively actors scraping by in New York City. They had taken every odd job imaginable, from furniture moving to clerical work, just to keep a roof over their heads. The dream of making it in Hollywood seemed distant, but their persistence never wavered. They relentlessly auditioned, being constantly met with rejection upon rejection. Still, something was changing. Small roles in theater and TV were starting to pop up, leaving them to hope that perhaps their years of commitment would ultimately bear fruit. It was just a matter of time before chance came knocking in the guise of career, making roles that would launch them into superstardom. When Gene Hackman played Buck Barrow in Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, opposite Warren Beatty in Faye Dunaway, the movie became an immediate hit and revolutionized how Hollywood produced crime dramas. Hackman's wild but endearing brother to Clyde earned him a nomination for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him a rising star. In a single night, he went from being a struggling actor to one of the most sought-after stars in the industry. Directors recognized his ability to give his roles more depth and realism, and offers started to come in. The quiet, brooding man who had been expelled from acting school had silenced all the skeptics. Hoffman's breakthrough performance occurred in the same year as The Graduation, although initially it appeared that he would not be cast as Benjamin Braddock. Hoffman was neither tall, sleek, or conventionally attractive like other Hollywood stars, but director Mike Nichols saw something unique in him, a fumbling, lovable vulnerability that would revolutionize the modern leading man in defiance of the odds. The Graduate was a huge success, and Hoffman's performance as the bewildered college graduate resonated with the public. Not only did the film establish his career, but it also changed Hollywood's definition of what a leading man was overnight. He was no longer merely another struggling actor, he was a star. Although they both achieved success at the same time, Hoffman and Hackman's professional lives seldom intersected. Their careers thrived in parallel, with Hackman appearing in dark, intense films such as The French Connection and The Conversation, while Hoffman performed in life-changing roles in Midnight Cowboy and Papone. Even though their performing styles and decisions differed wildly, both achieved fame for their talent to lose themselves in performances, infusing parts with raw emotional realism that audiences adored. The two friends, who had just a few years earlier rented a small New York apartment and fought for enough money to pay rent, were now household names, seeing that all the struggle had been worth it. Hollywood's most underappreciated friendship. Despite their quick rise to fame, even though their career paths diverged, Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman never let fame weaken the foundation of their friendship. Unlike most Hollywood friendships that break down due to ego, rivalry, or different lifestyles, theirs was built on a much stronger mutual respect and a friendship that went beyond business. No matter how many awards or accolades they received, they never lost sight of the time when they had only each other to rely on, even as their names became well known in every home. Hoffman and Hackman shared a special friendship, though it was often private and off the record. They were rarely seen together at industry events, and they never mentioned their friendship in interviews, but whenever they did cross paths, there was a silent recognition of their shared past. Hoffman enjoyed making fun of Hackman's rough demeanor, and Hackman, a man with few social graces in Hollywood, always made time for his close friend. Although some might have preferred to see them collaborate on a film more often, they never did. Their friendship was based on decades of shared experiences and did not require the backing of a film. When they finally shared the screen together in Runaway Jury, 2003, it was a moment decades in the making, but even though their scenes together were brief, both critics and viewers sensed the electric chemistry between them. Even as Hollywood changed and the industry became more brutal, Hoffman has since admitted that working with Hackman after all those years was like carrying on a conversation that had never truly ended. There was a comfort between them, a knowledge that didn't require words, a brief moment of their friendship that served as a silent reminder of their past. Over the years, even as Hackman retreated from acting, their bond remained strong. In contrast to most friendships in Hollywood, Hoffman frequently spoke kindly about his former friend, applauding his decision to retire but detesting the loss of their late-night conversations. Their friendship was based on two men who had previously been struggling aspirants sharing their many stories, not on position or networking. It was a rare kind of relationship that had endured the years in an industry where friendships come and go. For an actor as renowned and gifted as Gene Hackman, quiet retirement was the norm. Their friendship remained strong despite the amount of time that had passed between their encounters as actors. After nearly 50 years in the film industry, 2 Oscars, and an unending list of memorable roles, Hackman decided to retire on his own terms in 2004. This decision was both shocking and admired, as many of his peers continued to work well into old age. With nothing more to demonstrate that his reputation was secure, he gently slipped away, lacking the need for the attention that sometimes accompanies fading stars. Hackman was never known for being gregarious, and after retiring, he took on a life style that was very different from Hollywood's, favoring solitude over spectacle and avoiding public appearances and discussing his prior work. Hackman found a new passion for writing and spent his time working on historical fiction novels, which had long captivated him. He wrote several books over the years, immersing himself in research and narrative to capture his meticulous acting style. Although his books are not as well known as his film work, they reflect his love of American history and the human condition and gave him a creative outlet free from the demands of the film industry, allowing him to maintain his artistic sensibilities on his own terms. Santa Fe, New Mexico was the haven for Hickman. The austere landscapes and serene ambience fit his personality better than Hollywood's frenetic pace. He preferred mundane routines, restoring vintage cars, biking, and satiating his passion for history and architecture. Unlike many retired thespians who tried to attract attention with social media or reminiscing interviews, Hickman issued any form of self-advertising. He turned down interview offers, made few public comments, and existed with no need for validation by the industry from which he had departed. He was content with his history but wasn't interested in staying there. Although he fell off Hollywood's radar, his impact was not denied. There were numerous actors who came after him and named him as an influence, and his performances remained studied by critics and film students alike. Though he was gone, there was something undoubtedly reverent about his work, his capacity to bring to life deeply flawed but compelling characters, his impeccable timing, his rock-solid authenticity. Since Gene Hackman had already made a name for himself as one of the greatest performers of all time, he did not need to pursue fame later in life. His retirement was a deliberate choice to live his life as he saw fit, because he always had the unexpected death. The news of Gene Hackman's sudden and unexpected death shocked both his close friends and the film industry, because he had lived his later years outside of the spotlight in Santa Fe, New Mexico, avoiding the limelight and enjoying the peace and quiet he had always desired. On what seemed to be a routine morning, a maintenance man went to Hackman's house for a planned check and found a terrifying scene. Both Hickman and his wife Betsy Arawakawa were dead, lying motionless in various rooms of the house. Their deaths were not only sad, but also extremely unsettling, because there were no early signs of what had killed them. The detectives initially suspected carbon monoxide poisoning, an unseen killer who had previously killed similar groups, but after a thorough investigation, no traces of the gas were found in the house, and the house itself was undisturbed, unmolested, and unoverturned. Police and emergency personnel arrived on the scene quickly, but the intrigue only grew stronger. There was no sign of breaking and entering, no visible injuries, and no indication of foul play. The finding of Hackman's pacemaker, which had crucial information about his last minutes, further complicated matters. There was nothing to suggest whatsoever other than that everything happened as usual, as if time itself had frozen for Gene and Betsy at the moment of their death. Police were stunned by the analysis. A clear picture of the timeline surrounding Oscar Winter's death was provided by the fact that his last heartbeat was recorded more than a week before the body was discovered. This change in circumstances led to a completely different series of events that raised terrifying questions about whether his wife was still alive in the days after his death or if something much stranger happened. Hickman, according to authorities today, Hickman most likely passed away more than a week before anybody noticed his body. Toxicology testing and autopsy examinations were started, but there was no apparent cause of death. Soon, fans were overwhelmed by speculation. As the official investigation proceeded, reporters and even Hickman's acquaintances struggled to understand what had truly happened in the final days of his life. Dustin Hoffman and Hickman's closest friends and colleagues were left in shock that their longtime friend had passed away so suddenly and under such strange circumstances, and the lack of clear explanations only served to increase the number of questions surrounding Hickman's death, making it one of Hollywood's most mysterious celebrity deaths in recent years. While the world mourned the loss of a Hollywood giant, one thing was certain: Gene Hickman had been a mystery even in death. What actually happened to Gene Hickman, a sinister force at work with no obvious signs of struggle, no proof of foul play, and an alarming timing gap between G. Hickman's last recorded heartbeat and the finding of his body? The abrupt and mysterious nature of his death sparked a surge of speculation that left investigators with more questions than answers. One of the first theories suggested a natural but unreported medical event, such as a heart attack or STR, or stroke, that went unnoticed because Hickman led such a solitary life. However, since his wife Betsy Arawaka also died under similar circumstances, the likelihood of a common medical emergency seemed remote, because two people rarely died simultaneously under such ambiguous circumstances, and people were suspicious that an outside force had killed them. The most likely explanation was carbon monoxide poisoning. Since the gas is notorious for silently suffocating its victims without warning, the fact that a dead dog was found further supported this theory. However, when police examined the air in Hickman's home, they found no carbon monoxide, which led experts to rule out a gas leak, leaving investigators with no other option but to look elsewhere for answers. Others hypothesized that their deaths might have been brought on by an environmental contaminant, either from food, water, or medicine. Although several prescription medications were found in the home, toxicology testing did not provide any preliminary evidence of poisoning. There was also no sign of an overdose or any lethal combination of substances, and the lack of a known reason only added to the mystery. The state of the house itself, everything was intact, was among the most peculiar aspects of the case. No broken glass, no signs of forced entry, and no furniture that has been flipped over. There would have been some indication of struggle if there had been a home invasion or an outside force, but the eerie silence led some to propose the alternative theory that Hickman and his wife were victims of an extremely rare but deadly occurrence, an oxygen shortage caused by an abrupt change in atmosphere or an impenetrable gas. Some people explored even more odd theories that suggested deliberate poisoning, covert medical conditions, or even psychological influences that may have played a role in their deaths, but these beliefs were only conjecture because there was no concrete proof. Hickman's pacemaker's final announcement that his heart had stopped beating 9 days prior to the discovery of his body was just one more piece of information that added further curious as to how he was found so late in a town where he had regular callers and staff. What happened during those lost days when neither doctors nor authorities seemed to have any explanations? Naturally, rumors spread. Others believed Hickman had been attacked for unknown reasons. The mystery surrounding Gene Hickman's final moments would continue to feed rumors until a clear cause of death could be established, leaving his friends, fans, and investigators searching for closure for days after the shocking news of Gene Hickman's passing. Some believed the deaths were related to an unreported medical condition. As Hollywood rushed to honor one of its best actors, Dustin Hoffman remained silent. In a passionate conversation, Hickman's best buddy paused before saying a single word, and when he did, it was infused with more than 6 decades of friendship. In his cryptic remarks, Hoffman had made it very evident that Hickman was not just a Hollywood legend but also a man who was misunderstood throughout his life. After a moving remembrance of Hickman's life that only his best friend Hoffman could connect to, he sent many in a tiz to guess what he meant. Hoffman recalled how Hickman had been his first true friend in the company, the one who had taken him in when he had nowhere else to go. He described Hickman as a man of paradoxes, personally intense but extremely devoted. He was gruff on the exterior but had a surprising softness. In his homage, Hoffman most strikingly emphasized Hickman's unwavering vitality. Hoffman had regarded Hickman as a mentor in his early days, someone who pushed him to be better but never let him succumb to self-doubt. Gene never took things halfway. Hoffman claimed that when he put his all into something, whether it was acting, auto repair, or even just reading a book, Hickman never felt uncomfortable with fame. Hoffman also revealed a side of Hickman that few had seen, a man who, in spite of his incredible success, felt like an outsider. Hoffman claimed that he didn't play the Hollywood game since he never accepted the limelight that came with it. During his funeral, Hoffman acknowledged that he never wanted to be in the spotlight and that he left because he valued his independence more than performing. As he talked about his deceased friend, Hoffman's voice trembled with emotion as he recalled their last conversation weeks before Hickman's passing, when they had reminisced about their humble beginnings and laughed about how poor we were then, how insane it was. Hoffman said that the last thing he ever said to me was, "We made it, Dusty, we actually did." That memory, Hoffman added, was what he would remember most as the world grieved for gone Hickman. Hoffman described a man who was never motivated by money or awards but by a questing urge to get better and better. Hickman. The true man behind the roles to the world was Gene Hickman, a thespian giant and virtuoso of brooding, no-frills characters who dominated the screen with a subtle but unmistakable authority. However, those who knew him up close saw a different persona that rarely made it into the spotlight behind Hollywood's gaze. Dustin Hoffman grieved something much deeper, the loss of a brother, a lifelong friend, and the last link to a time when they were two dreamers struggling to make it. Although his on-screen persona was often intimidating, his off-screen friends described Hickman as a man who never became too serious even in success. He loved telling stories, both on and off-screen, and he used to entertain his peers with strange, in-depth historical anecdotes, building tips, or random facts that no one else seemed to share. Hickman was a humorist who was inquisitive, introspective, and had a quick, frequently sarcastic wit that occasionally surprised people. In contrast to most of his peers, Hickman had a fiercely independent personality that shaped both his personal and professional lives. He hated the pretentiousness of attending industry parties and award ceremonies and never sought the approval of Hollywood's elite. This freedom was carried over into his acting as well. He regularly portrayed roles that defied type, choosing flawed, nuanced characters over classic leading men, and would much rather be at home fixing an old automobile than smoozing at an upscale party. His playing of morally ambiguous characters from the French Connection's Popey Doyle to unforgiven Little Bill Daggett was an expression of his philosophy that actual people were never absolutely good or bad. This adherence to sincerity distinguished him, and although he acted as a violent man on film, he had no interest in playing the Hollywood game in real life. Aside from acting, Hickman had a curiosity in the intellectual arena that drove much of his other interests. He later applied his narrative skill as a writer in his later life, writing historical fiction novels detailing his interest in American history, but even previously he had always been an avid reader and an astute observer of what was going on around him. He might discourse at length on military tactics one day and mid-century design the next. He possessed a natural talent for learning, one that probably served him well in creating the richness he brought to his characters, unlike most actors who trusted entirely to instinct. Hickman prepared meticulously for his work, often getting lost in the minutiae of a character, but for all his larger-than-life career Hickman was intensely private, keeping his private life in the background. He cherished his close friendships, but he chose carefully who he opened his life to. Even his closest friends understood that there were aspects of Hickman that were unknowable, something that he never felt obligated to untangle. For the public, maybe that was part of his lasting charm. He never wanted to justify himself or build an image. He just was what he was on screen and off, and that genuineness is the reason he's one of the most revered actors of his time. Unfinished business. Everyone was left wondering what Gene Hickman could have accomplished if he had continued with a career that lasted almost 50 years. He had already made a name for himself as one of Hollywood's most respected actors, but his abrupt retirement left an unbridgeable gap, while most of his peers continued to work well into old age. Hickman chose to retire while at the height of his career, leaving his colleagues and fans to wonder what roles he could have taken on and whether he would have entered the age of prestige if he had stayed. TV took on new roles, changed existing ones, or even went back to some of his most enduring characters. One of Hickman's biggest dreams was that he would work with old friends like Dustin Hoffman or Robert Duvall on a final film. While Runaway Jury, 2003, featured a brief but memorable scene between Hickman and Hoffman, it only served to increase the rumors that the two might have starred in something more. Most directors had been eager to work with Hickman, and offers continued to come in even after he retired. Directors like Quentin Tarantino and the Coen brothers have expressed interest in creating a role just for Hickman outside of Hollywood, while Clint Eastwood, who directed Hickman in Unforgiven, had already alluded to working with him again. Hickman's artistic endeavors in writing were another where his unfinished business remained, though he was able to make a successful transition to being an author. His novels never achieved the mainstream success that his movies had. Some felt that if he had entered the literary world with the same passion that he approached acting, he could have become a highly regarded novelist. His interest in history and narrative had all the potential for a career outside of film, but it was a private passion. More than a dominant second act, it was frequently speculated whether he had one more great book in him, one that might have cemented his creative legacy outside of acting further. Ultimately, while Hickman's career ended on his own terms, the lingering feeling that there was more left to explore remained. Whether it was in film, literature, or another artistic endeavor, there is no doubt that he had more stories to tell. Fans continued to speculate about what a Hickman closing performance would have been like, a return to the big screen for one last iconic role, a role that could have further capped his already. Although his time in the spotlight ended years ago, his legacy is measured by the lasting impact he left on the film industry, not by the unfinished work. His retirement, despite its admiration, left many wondering what might have been a riddle appropriate for a man who spent his career bringing mystifying characters to life. While many performers retire and fade, Gene Hackman's legacy endures long after his active career is over. In the background, Hackman's presence is still deeply ingrained in the fabric of movie history. His performances were marked by a gritty realism that captivated audiences and established a standard for acting authenticity. Hackman never relied on bombast or theatrics. Instead, he applied raw and often unsettling honesty to his roles as a ruthless sheriff in Unforgiven, a guilt-ridden coach in Hours, or a neurotic detective in The French Connection. Hackman had an unmatched talent for making each of his characters lived and imperfect and completely human. His influence on acting is incalculable. His enthusiasm, technique, and dedication to delivering stories continue to be standards for young performers. Part of what makes Hackman's influence relevant today is his versatility. He was able to effortlessly transition between genres and demonstrate his mastery of whatever he set his mind to. He could play the lead in a political thriller, Drive, an action movie, or anchor a film like The Royal Tenenbaums. He demonstrates that, even at his advanced age, he was able to recast himself and challenge audiences by taking on roles that defied the expectations that audiences had of him. This adaptability ensured that his work remained current, whether it was film students analyzing his performances or modern actors taking inspiration from his character development techniques. In addition to his collection of work, Hackman's legacy is one of creative honor. He never pursued popularity or the allure of celebrity culture in a field where commercial feasibility and marketability frequently take precedence over talent. Hackman was always someone who valued the craft above all else. He didn't give a damn about self-promotion, preferring to let his work speak for itself. Even after he left Hollywood, his shadow persisted as both critics and fans kept returning to see and enjoy his films. His aura made him one of the few performers who could leave on their own terms without selling out, and his refusal to chase the limelight only strengthened it. That concludes it. Please click the like button if you liked this video. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss anything. Now, watch this next video right here on the screen. I promise you won't want to miss it. See you there.